Our world is undergoing the most dramatic, the most powerful change ever seen in the history of humanity. We have entered the age of AI and the age of Aquarius simultaneously, and I do not think that's an accident. In fact, I think it's the universe's way of saying we need as many people as possible to be in higher consciousness so that we can manage artificial intelligence to benefit the vast majority of people. Hi, I'm inspirational speaker and best-selling author Cynthia L. Elliott, and I am here to help guide humanity through some tough conversations and some tough and challenging times. If you like to be inspired by great thought leaders, tech gurus, wellness experts, and authors, please join me and my wonderful panel of guests for Soul Tech with Cynthia. Hello, and welcome to Soul Tech with Cynthia. You guys are so amazing. Thank you so much for all the wonderful feedback. You love the tweaked name. So thank you for reaching out to me. I am super excited about today's episode because we're going to be talking about a subject that I think is really relevant to all of my listeners. And that is storytelling in the age of AI with the amazing 8-time author, Gabrielle Dolan, who's written extensively. All 8 of your books are on storytelling, right?
Yeah, run storytelling or communication. Yep.
Yeah. So we're going to be digging into what she does because I think it's going to be really helpful for everyone who listens in helping to position yourself uniquely in such extraordinary times. So welcome, Gabrielle.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here, Cynthia.
Yeah. So just take a moment to tell the audience a little bit about your work.
Yeah, so I worked in corporate Australia at one of Australia's largest banks, and that was 20 years ago. And it was in those sort of last roles there in technology and change management that I sort of started to realize that when you shared a story, people sort of seemed to get the message better, and you could sort of influence an outcome more. So I was really convinced that storytelling was a communication skill, a leadership skill, an influencing skill. No one was talking about storytelling. So I actually decided to leave my corporate job and teach people how to tell stories more effectively. And it'd be fair to say the first couple of years were pretty slow. People would go, what the hell has storytelling got to do with business?
Yeah.
That
You
was
were ahead of your time. You really were.
Yes, I tell my children that. I'm like, listen to your mother. I'm so ahead of my time. Um, and that's what I do. And now, and I always think storytelling is important, but in a world of AI generated content, like to me now, it's absolutely critical. Like you just if you're using AI generated content, it's just all bland and it's starting to sound the same and it sounds like AI.
Hmm.
But your stories are needed more than ever. But AI is not the enemy, and used wisely, AI can actually help you find and refine your stories.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. It's a sort of an interesting thing I've gone through personally. As an agency owner, one of the big things that I did was help companies tell their own stories. But I switched to being an author and speaker, and it is a lot different to try to tell your own story and know what will matter to them because what matters to you or what you think is important isn't necessarily what's going to resonate with people and it's so important now in such a competitive environment with AI being able to do a lot of things and having gifts that outpace AI and knowing how to tell stories especially your own is going to help not only position you competitively in the marketplace but it helps position you as an individual as a personal brand.
Yeah,
uh
absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I sort of think that, your brand are literally the stories people share about you. And so you have to be sharing those stories in the first place. But when you said, Cynthia, it's hard to write your own stories. When I do work, especially with comms, marketing and comms people, they're so used to writing stories for other people or the company. And I get them to focus on, no, you need to start sharing your stories. It's like they really struggle. It's like they've spent their whole career doing it for other people.
mhm.
And it is hard to share your own stories, because we, don't want to feel like we're bragging and boasting about ourselves all the time. But
Yeah.
there's such a powerful way to communicate, whether it's your own values or what you want to achieve or just, a message you need to communicate.
It's so true. Yeah, I tell people all the time because I've been using AI like a lot of people from the moment generative AI hit. I was like, oh, I gotta play
Yep.
with this, especially as an
Yep.
artist. And I tell people all the time, like, I want you to think about generative AI that you come across. While it's stunningly beautiful and very cool looking, it is incredibly forgettable. And
Yeah.
no matter how stunning it is, no matter how wild it is and crazy and whatever, you will forget it. And I believe, and this is just my theory, that one of the reasons that generative AI is forgettable is because it does not have, it cannot harness, it may be able to harness our history and our technology and our books, but it cannot harness human energy. And when you remove the human energy from the action, it has a shallowness, which I think is what's true for generative AI copy and
Mm,
text. It might be technically accurate or technically correct, but it's lacking in the soul.
yeah.
And that I think that just goes back to what you were saying about learning how to tell your own story.
Yeah. I totally agree. I Cynthia, I feel like a bit of deja vu. I'm old enough to remember when PowerPoint first entered the workforce. So,
Oh yeah.
this is going back about 36 years
Oh
now.
yeah.
And we were all excited because we used to have the overhead projector and the transparencies and it was so hard to create one slide. And then PowerPoint came, and we just thought with this technology, our presentations are just going to be like amazing. Like, there's little clip art characters, and, you can transition your slides from the left or the right or the dissolve from the middle. And we sort of got sucked in that this technology would make our presentations like so much more engaging. And of course it didn't, right? It like, the death by PowerPoint is a thing. So it didn't do that. And I feel like we're at that space with AI that we think, oh, AI can produce all this content for us, it can produce these stories, I can do so much. And it's coming out, but it's sort of going, but that like it doesn't have soul. What you said, it
Yeah.
literally doesn't have soul. It's when the reason I wrote my last book is I had I'd been in workshops and people would say, can, will AI replace storytelling? And I was like, oh my God, I was actually horrified that people were even asking me that question for a
Yeah.
start. And then other people would say, can you use AI to help with your stories? And my first reaction was like, no, you can't. That's cheating. I'm a purist. But I thought, well, if you consider yourself a storytelling expert, you probably should look into this. And
Hmm.
so I did. And I started to experiment with, ChatGPT and Claude. And I would sort of say, I would go in and say, can you write me a personal story, like in the first person, around risk management or innovation?
Hmm.
And I'd get this, the story would come back. And I was about to say pleasantly surprised then, but it wasn't pleasantly. I was disturbingly surprised how good it was.
I
Like,
know,
it's sort
right?
of like, oh, actually, that's not bad. That's pretty good, but it was missing something. It was lacking something. And what it's lacking is that, that human energy that you just said. It's
Hmm.
lacking, and sometimes it's hard to put your finger on what it's lacking, but
Hmm.
it's lacking that. It's lacking human energy, it's lacking emotion, it's lacking soul. It just something doesn't feel right. Because it doesn't feel real, because it's not real, because AI wrote it.
Yeah, yeah, it's great at organizing. I've been using it. So I'm writing a book on consciousness right now, which comes out in October. And I've been
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, it's the mission of all the work I do. And I'm like, you still haven't written the book on consciousness yet, but it's the mission of all your work. It's probably time to do that. And I've been using different platforms for research, and it is really great for research and
Hmm?
organizing things in a succinct way. And it it asked me, "Would you like me to write the first chapter?" And I was like, "No, I'm writing the book myself." And it was like, "Congratulations." And
You're the first author that has said that to me.
I know, right? Right. But I mean, I did use, so my third book was a conversation with artificial intelligence. I wrote the premise about what had happened to the American dream and where we are, where we needed to be. But the rest of the book about the issues we have in America was me conversating with AI about how we could actually cure a lot of the issues here. And but it says that on the cover. But a book, I would never pretend to write a book that I didn't write. But it is great. I think it's a great tool. So uh, what are some of the things like when you teach or you're writing your books, what are some of those key elements in storytelling that you think a lot of people just don't haven't
Yeah.
learned yet?
Yeah, look, I think when it comes to storytelling, so a lot of people will go, well, I don't have stories like, and or I don't have a story. It's like it's not one story, it's lots of stories. And I always, my premise is, especially in business where like whether people are going for job interviews or got to do a presentation or communicate to their team or whatever, I always come back to what's the message, what's the actual message you're trying to communicate. And people really struggle to answer that. And it was like, well, if you're not clear on the message, you're not going to find a story. So it's sort of like, don't start with the story. Start with what are you trying to communicate? So, and helping them drill that down to like a single message. So I think one of the biggest mistakes people make is they want a story that covers off everything. So it's like
Mhm.
I still have people ring me and go, "Can you help us come up with our organizational story or our brand story or our strategy story?" It's like there's not one story that's going to communicate your entire brand or your entire strategy. Lots of stories will do that. So I think the first mistake people go to is they're not clear on the message. Um, I talk about the four different types of stories that you should
Mhm.
share in the book, and one of the most powerful stories yet underutilized stories is the personal story, as in it didn't happen at work. So I'm not talking deep, dark personal stuff, but it's just something that didn't happen at work and how you can connect it to a work message. Now, whether that work message is one of your leadership values, personal values, or the company values or purpose, or just anything like innovation, or you've got to give a presentation around risk management, like how you can share a personal story to do that. So it's thinking of the personal stories. And then I think I'm going to say two other really common mistakes. They go too long. So people are telling a story, it just goes way too long. So my
Yeah,
advice
yeah.
is like 1 minute, 90 seconds, 60 to 90 seconds is a good, aim for that. And the other thing, sadly, and I can't believe I still have this conversation in my workshops with senior leaders, is some people still think it's okay to make up stories as long as it's believable and gets the message across. It's okay. And I sort of then, talk to them about like, but why would you make up stories when you've
Yeah,
got so
yeah.
many stories, like so many? And the reason they're making up stories is they just think their stories aren't important enough or big enough. And sadly, a lot of these conversations I have are with senior leaders in industries like the finance industry, professional service firm industry, where they're already coming from a low level of trust. It's like people, like, we are in a world of distrust too. Like, I don't
Yeah.
know if you follow the Edelman report, but they produce a global report every 20 years, and it's trust is at its absolute lowest
Yeah.
because we don't it's really hard to know what to believe.
Oh, I
So
know.
my thing is like, don't add to that. Like, don't add to that by making up stories or exaggerating your own stories. Just use your real authentic stories.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And yeah, I teach introduction to public relations at one of the schools to people in their 20s, and I tell them, you have to sometimes you have to actually really dig for the story. So like just for example, I generally did when I was early in my early days of marketing and PR, I usually had a famous chef or the
Mm-hmm.
owners were really famous or the interior designer was some insanely famous guy. And so that was always a good way to hook and build a story off of. But there were times that when I didn't have anybody or anything to really work it, and one in particular, I looked into the building that it took place in, and it used to be a speakeasy. But
Oh, nice. Yeah.
it took me just continuing to be like, okay, let's dig into the people. Okay, it's not the people. Let's dig into
Yep.
the menu. It's not the menu. Like, do they bring anything into the country that's never been brought here before? I actually got avocado, not avocado oil, that oil, that Moroccan oil. Like I did do the
Yep.
first story in the US on that. I was like, I was digging for something. Anyway, my
Yeah.
point in all this is sometimes you do have to get creative, and sometimes you have to go into the history of a company and find out like why was it originally started. But don't just take the surface. And if you're really
No.
struggling for something, sometimes you have to just get really creative. I don't believe in inventing stories. Although my Memory Mansion was so wild, I've been accused of it by you. I'm like, no, I was actually the tame version of some of the crap I've done. Um, but it's really great when you get to a place in life in your 50s where you stop giving a flying. what anybody thinks about
Yep.
you.
Yeah, that is that is one of the great benefits of getting old. There's not too many, but
Yeah,
yeah, not
that's
not
one.
not giving a crap about what other people think is definitely one of them.
Yeah, I think when you said that about to the executives and you're like, you don't invent something. If the story is not authentic, people can feel it even if they don't know what's off. And the person saying it will carry the energy of someone full of shit.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I actually you know, say if you're making up stories, like you'd want to be a really good actor because when you retell a story, you don't just retell it, you relive it. And people sort of sense that. And you know, I'm from Australia. Australians have the highest bullshit detectors going on. And it was like so and you know, I think most people do, but you don't you know you do you don't just retell it, you relive it. So it's
Hmm.
you know it's just absolutely not worth making up stories. And again, what you were saying, sometimes you've got to dig a little bit, and just people sort of think, oh, I don't have stories. And especially when it comes to company brand stories or your own brand
Hmm.
stories, it's like going, and it's not sticking with the standard, you know, case studies. Like that's another mistake. People think case studies are stories. They're not stories, they're case studies. They, you know, I run a business on storytelling. I absolutely use case studies, but they serve a completely different purpose. So it's how you can find those stories. In my previous book, Magnetic Stories, I talk about the five types of brand stories,
Hmm.
and that's I think that's what you were sort of talking about, digging to find, like, you know, is it a really cool thing that this company did, or this, you know, I remember I actually interviewed a I did a case study in the book on this really cool restaurant in Florida in the US, and it was just like they're known for customer service, and the stories they shared on their social media were just so super cool and such great examples of how you just share tiny little stories to build your brand.
Hmm. Yeah, no. Which restaurant was it? Because I'm in Florida.
Oh wow! So it's the oh my God, I've got a mind blank. It's a Spanish restaurant. Hang
Yeah,
on, let me.
don't worry about it if you can't. And I know that feeling. When somebody like asks you a question, you're like, "That was 3 books ago."
Yeah, no. So, but you know what? I remember the story. So, one story, and I put it in the book. It's the Columbia restaurant. Anyway,
Yeah.
they shared a story on Valentine's Day about this couple that was celebrating their 71st wedding anniversary. And they were talking about, you know, that's a sign of love. And they talked about on their first wedding anniversary, they came to the Columbia restaurant to celebrate their first wedding anniversary. And on their second anniversary, they came back and coincidentally was seated at the same table. For the next 69 years, Columbia Restaurant had reserved that table for them to come back and have their wedding
Ah,
anniversary. Now, and so it was sort of like it was a story about the couple, but the subtle message is you're going, oh, that is super cool for that restaurant to do that,
yeah. No,
right?
yeah, yeah.
And you know, I'm going there next time I'm in Florida. I'm going there because like how amazing. So
Yeah.
like it's things like stories like that that are really sticky. Like
Yeah, and
you know,
it may not to somebody on the surface, and you're like, oh, they had this table that it's all in the delivery and in the detail.
yeah. Yeah, the
It's
Columbia restaurant. So,
okay,
and you know what? That's like I forgot the name of the restaurant for a
but you didn't
while,
forget the story.
but I didn't forget the story. I absolutely
Yeah,
didn't
yeah,
forget the
yeah.
story. Yeah.
Which is easy to figure out when you're like, so the stories will carry with people. I've learned to as an agency owner, I learned to do something that always made the bosses nervous. I interviewed everybody, and sometimes that was a lot because it could be a couple hundred people that I was interviewing. It wasn't every single person in the company, but they were people who'd been there for either a long time or
Mm-hmm.
um, that is how I found it was a great way to find out the real story because the one that you're getting on
Yeah.
the surface or the one that you may hear as an employee of a company or you may even take over as the CEO, but what you're getting is more recent. So just as an example, I had interviewed a bunch of people it was the oldest fastener company in the country, which sounds really boring, but if you actually understand fasteners, that grommets and washers, they hold everything together. So you could be sitting in a room with several hundred of them and you wouldn't even know because they're in everything. And interviewing the staff there, the average person had been there for 30 or 40 or 50 years.
Wow.
turns out the company is almost 200 years old, and they originally started by selling their product to both sides in the Civil War.
Oh, cool. So yeah.
Yeah, and they had photo. I mean, we had to dig, but we pulled photos up, and so we set up the whole thing to be about their 200th anniversary and showing their history as a company, and that you could
Mm,
trust a company that had been around for 200 years and had
yeah.
employees that had been around for that long. So storytelling is really fascinating. Uh,
Yeah.
so tell me, you've got a new book that can you
Yeah.
share? Can you share anything on this new book?
I can. So
All
the book
right.
it's called Story Intelligence.
Oh,
And the tagline is the craft of authentic storytelling made smarter with AI. So it's funny, Cynthia. I tell the people, I've got a new book, Story Intelligence. Like, oh, right. And then I do the tagline, the craft of authentic storytelling made smarter with AI. They go, oh, wow. So yeah, I s this is definitely my last book on storytelling. I know I said that the last book, but I feel it. I feel it in my bones that this is the last book on storytelling. So I feel like it's 20 years of my career is in this
yeah.
book. So look, it sort of goes through a little bit about why storytelling's important and why we need it now more than ever. But then it goes into a really practical guide on how to use storytelling, all the different ways you can use, storytelling in presentations. There's so many examples in there. There's a chapter on how to find your stories without AI, and then there's a chapter on how to use AI to find and refine your stories. I go through the four different types of stories I spoke about. Um, there's one chapter I probably should. It goes back to what we were talking about, that the AI stories lack soul. Is I did a test, so I came up with six different topics. I wrote a story for each of them, and then I got ChatGPT to write six and Claude to write six, and I got people to blind test rate them. They had no they first of all they had no idea any of them were generated by AI.
Mhm.
And what was really interesting is my stories. I got them to rate them on a whole different things, but the two things that are important is authenticity. So did it feel real, and did it make sense? And my stories, clarity and authenticity, were sort of rated the same, but all of the AI stories, clarity was rated okay, as in the story made sense, but authenticity was really low. So again, it's just reinforcing that you can look at a story and on the surface you could go, yeah, that makes sense. That's a good story, but it doesn't feel real and it's lacking that soul that we spoke about.
Yeah.
So there's a chapter in that as well. So yeah, I'm pretty proud of it. It debuted at number one on Australia's business books, and it hit
Oh,
on Amazon Hot
congrat
Renew. Yeah, I was very
congratulations,
excited.
congratulations. Sorry, on Amazon.
Um, yeah, Amazon Hot New Releases. It reached like number one in four different
Oh,
categories. So
I
like
love that. I love
business
that.
communications, presentation, even
Yeah.
social skills. It reached number one in social skills. So, and there is a chapter on how you can use it in speeches and eulogies and like it, because it's a day-to-day
Yeah.
communication skill. It's not just a business skill.
Yeah, I know, I agree with that. And I think something that for people take away that I have just from not only listening to you and your work. You guys, you have to train your AI on how you think. You have to teach
Mm,
it what your brand is, and a lot of people use it without considering that. So I imported my books because
yeah.
I tell a lot of personal stories, which is a lot of why I do the work that I do. I imported my books, everything, a lot of things that I had written to teach it
Hmm.
how to help me better. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I think that's the one that often gets left out. It's like, you need to teach your AI who your brand is. Now you can use
Yeah.
it to help you figure out what that is,
Yeah, you can, but
but your
you still got to be
voice.
you still got to be careful with that. So
Yeah.
for example, I've got my own paid, model, and I it sort of gets to know you. But the other day I put something in, just to do a bit of an edit. It was like I said something like, I teach people to communicate more effectively through sharing or stories, and it came back going, I teach people how to communicate more authentically by stories that bridges the gap between impact and trust. And I'm going, what the hell? What the hell does that mean? But the trap is you could go, oh, that sounds good.
Hmm.
That sounds smart. So my thing is, it might sound good, but does it sound like you? And you sort of always got to question that.
Yeah, no, I agree. Oh, what a fascinating conversation. I really enjoyed this conversation. If our listeners want to go check out your book and your other
Yeah,
books, where would they
yeah.
go?
Okay, so it's available globally. So like Amazon, all the usual ones. Just look up Story Intelligence, Gabrielle Dolan. You'll find me. I'm active on LinkedIn, so stay connected. And I've got my own website, Keeping It Real with Jack and Ral on the Ral. So if you like listening to podcasts, which clearly you do because you're listening to this amazing podcast, then you might want to come over and have a listen to my podcast as well.
I love that. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your extraordinary experience in storytelling. I'm sure our listeners are going to be now going,
Hmm.
how do I roll this into what I do?
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
so thanks for joining us today. All right, you guys, if you're not already a subscriber, what on earth are you thinking? There's so much dumb information out there, and here at Soul Tech with Cynthia, you get intelligent conversation, something to help raise your level of consciousness instead of drain you, like an energy vampire. So if you're not already subscribed, please subscribe and share the show with your friends and family. If you want to learn more about my work and my new book, Soul Tech, The Art and Science of Higher Consciousness, 12 Codes to Higher Consciousness, go check out that and my other three books at cynthialelliott.com. And of course, if you want to learn about the work that inspired the name of the show, my 501c3 nonprofit, the soultechfoundation.org, which is committed to sharing educational programs and events with the community, the public, to help raise up underserved women and children in the age of AI. So you can go check out that and learn more about the events that we have coming up at soultechfoundation.org. And of course, you can find me on all the social media platforms under Cynthia L. Elliott or Soul Tech with Cynthia. You guys have an amazing week. Thank you again, Gabriel. I want to
Thank
stay in,
you.
we're going to stay in touch. And we'll be back more with Soon Enough, you guys. Did that actually come out correct? We'll be back with more soon enough. Yeah, it did. All right. Bye, you guys. See ya.